The note was already under his bill before he even finished his drink. No one saw her place it there, yet somehow it waited for him like it had always belonged. Ethan Caldwell glanced down at the leather folder, distracted, his thumb still scrolling through emails on his phone. But the moment he flipped it open, his hand stopped, because tucked beneath the receipt was a small folded slip of paper, perfectly aligned, deliberate, and wrong. The restaurant around him moved in its usual rhythm. Glasses clinked. A server laughed softly near the bar. Outside, Manhattan traffic hummed past the tall windows. None of it reached him anymore. He unfolded the note slowly, almost irritated at first, as if this was some marketing gimmick, but then he read it. 5 words. You already know the truth. His breath caught in his chest, not dramatically, not loudly, just enough to interrupt the steady control he had built over years. Ethan lowered the paper by an inch and looked up. The waitress stood exactly where she had been seconds ago, beside his table, holding a silver tray against her hip. Lily Harper, mid-20s, blonde hair tied back neatly, white shirt pressed, black apron tied with precision. She looked like every other server in the room, except she wasn't looking at him for approval, or for a tip, or even for acknowledgement. She was looking at him like she had been expecting this moment all along. Did you put this here? Ethan asked. His voice was quiet, controlled, but there was a sharper edge beneath it now. Lily didn't answer immediately. She stepped forward, reached down, and adjusted the angle of his water glass so it aligned perfectly with the edge of the table. The movement was small, almost unnecessary, yet deliberate enough to make him notice. Then she met his eyes. You read it, she said. It wasn't a question. Ethan studied her face, searching for recognition, for context, for anything that would make sense of the sudden pressure building behind his ribs. He had built a career on reading people in seconds. Investors, competitors, politicians. Everyone had a tell. But this woman stood still, composed, offering nothing except a quiet certainty that unsettled him more than any confrontation ever could. He let out a slow breath and leaned back in his chair. His Rolex ticked softly against the marble tabletop. As he adjusted his wrist, if this is some kind of stunt, he said, you picked the wrong table. Lily tilted her head slightly, just enough to acknowledge the statement without accepting it. I picked the only table that matters, she replied. The words landed clean. No hesitation. No apology. Across the room, a couple in business attire flagged her down, but she didn't move. Ethan noticed that. He also noticed the way her hands rested calmly at her sides, not fidgeting, not defensive. It was the posture of someone who had already made a decision. You're crossing a line, he said, his tone tightening. You don't even know me. Lily held his gaze, and for the first time, something shifted in her expression. Not anger, not fear, recognition. I know exactly who you are, Mr. Caldwell, she said. She reached into the pocket of her apron and placed a single folded document on the table, right beside the note, her fingers lingering for just a second before she pulled back. Ethan didn't touch it immediately. His eyes flicked from the paper to her face, then back again, calculating, measuring, resisting. The restaurant noise began to seep back and around him, but it felt distant, like it belonged to a different world. Open it, Lily said softly. Ethan hesitated, then slid the document toward himself and unfolded it halfway, just enough to see a name printed at the top. Daniel Harper. The air in his chest tightened again, this time deeper, more dangerous, because that name wasn't supposed to exist anymore, and yet here it was, sitting in front of him, written in black ink, impossible to ignore, and suddenly Ethan realized something that unsettled him far more than the note itself. He had never told anyone what really happened 5 years ago. So how did she know? The name on the document did not blur or shift. It stayed there, sharp and undeniable, as if it had been waiting years to be seen again. Ethan's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the paper. Then he looked up at Lily with a focus that had nothing to do with money anymore. Where did you get this? He asked. His voice dropped lower, controlled, but there was no mistaking the change. Lily did not answer right away. She reached for the check presenter, closed it neatly, and placed it back. In front of him, as if completing a routine task. The normalcy of the gesture clashed with the weight of what sat beneath it. You should sign that, she said calmly. Your assistant will want the receipt. Ethan did not move. He kept his eyes on her. That is not what I asked. Lily gave a small nod, acknowledging the tension, but she did not step back. And I did not say I would answer right away. A man at the neighboring table glanced over, sensing something off in the air, but quickly returned to his conversation when Ethan's posture shifted slightly, reclaiming space without raising his voice. Ethan slid the document fully open now. The paper was not new. The edges were worn, folded more than once, carried somewhere close for a long time. There was a company letterhead faintly visible at the top. Caldwell Strategic Holdings. Dated 5 years ago. He recognized the format immediately. Internal review. Restricted distribution. His eyes scanned the first paragraph, then stopped at a signature line. His own name. Not printed. Signed. The ink pressed harder than usual, like he had been in a hurry that day. This file was sealed, he said. There are only 3 copies of this in existence. Lily folded her arms lightly, not defensive, just steady. Then I guess you were looking at number 4. Ethan let out a short breath that almost sounded like a laugh, except there was no humor in it. That is not possible. Lily stepped closer, just enough that her voice would not carry beyond the table. It became possible the moment someone decided the truth was inconvenient. The words landed differently now, not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. Ethan tapped the edge of the paper once against the table. A habit. Measured. Thinking. Daniel Harper, he said slowly. He was an analyst. Junior level. He made a mistake on a projection model. It cost the firm millions. That is what this file shows. Lily's expression did not change, but something in her eyes sharpened. That is what the file says, she replied. That is not what happened. A server passed behind her with a tray of wine glasses. The soft clink of crystal filled the brief silence between them. Ethan leaned forward slightly now. You are making a serious claim, he said. Do you have any idea what you are implying? Lily held his gaze without blinking. I am not implying anything. She reached into her apron again and pulled out something smaller this time. A flash drive. Plain black. No label. She placed it on top of the document, directly over his signature. I am showing you. Ethan looked down at it, then back at her. The control he carried so naturally was still there, but it had shifted. It was no longer about managing a situation. It was about containing something that was starting to move beyond his reach. You could have sent this to a reporter, he said. Or a lawyer. Why come here? Lily's answer came without hesitation. Because I wanted to see if you would recognize it before anyone else had to. The statement hung in the air, quiet but heavy. Ethan leaned back in his chair again, but this time the movement felt different, less certain, more deliberate. He picked up the flash drive between his fingers, weighing it slightly, as if it could tell him something by touch alone. And if I do not? He asked. Lily straightened, her posture returning to that calm, professional stillness that made her blend into the room again. Then this stops being a conversation, she said. She turned slightly, ready to step away, but paused just long enough to add one more line. And tomorrow morning, it becomes a headline. Ethan watched her walk toward another table, greeting a couple with the same composed tone she had used all night, as if nothing had changed, as if she had not just placed his past directly in front of him. And as he looked back down at the flash drive resting on his own signature, one question pressed harder than all the others. What exactly was on it that she was so certain he would not be able to ignore? The flash drive felt heavier than it should have as Ethan turned it between his fingers, the matte surface catching the soft light from the chandelier above, and for the first time in years, he did not immediately reach for control. He reached for certainty. He slid his phone out of his jacket pocket, tapped the screen, then stopped, because whatever was on that drive was not something he could risk opening on a public network. Not here, not with eyes around him, even if no one seemed to be watching. Across the room, Lily moved with practiced ease, refilling a glass, nodding politely, blending back into the rhythm of the restaurant. Yet every movement felt intentional now, as if she had already set something in motion that did not require her presence to continue. Ethan stood up. The chair legs made a low scrape against the floor, just enough to draw a glance from a nearby table, but he ignored it. He picked up the check presenter, signed it in one clean motion, and slipped the flash drive into his inner pocket. Then he walked, not toward the exit, but toward her. Lily noticed him before he reached her. She finished placing a dessert plate in front of a couple, offered a brief smile, and then turned to face him fully. You are still here, she said. Ethan stopped about 3 feet from her, close enough for a private conversation, far enough to keep it controlled. I want to understand something, he said. If what you are implying is true, then you have had this for a while. Why now? Lily studied him for a second, as if weighing how much to say. Then she gestured subtly toward the service station near the back. Walk with me, she said. They moved together, not hurried, not hidden, just two people stepping out of the main flow of the dining room. The service station was quieter, tucked between a hallway that led to the kitchen and a wall lined with polished glassware. Lily picked up a folded linen napkin and smoothed it out on the counter, a simple, grounding motion. 5 years ago, she said. My brother called me the night before that report went final. Ethan did not interrupt. He said something felt wrong, she continued. He said the numbers were being pushed to match a decision that had already been made. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. That happens in every firm, he said. It is called alignment. Lily looked at him, and this time there was no softness in her expression. He said someone told him to sign off anyway, she replied. He refused. The hum of the kitchen doors swinging open and closed filled the brief silence. A cook called out an order. Plates moved. Life continued just a few feet away. Ethan crossed his arms, a subtle shift, protective but controlled, refusing to sign. Off on a model does not end a career, he said. Making mistakes does. Lily reached into her apron again, but instead of another document, she pulled out something smaller. A photograph, slightly faded. She placed it on the counter between them. Ethan looked down. It showed a younger Daniel Harper standing in front of a modest apartment building, smiling, holding a coffee cup with a local Brooklyn logo on it. Beside him stood Lily, younger, her hair shorter, both of them looking directly at the camera. There was a date stamp in the corner. 2 days before the report. He did not make a mistake, Lily said quietly. He made a choice. Ethan stared at the image longer than he expected to. The memory surfaced without permission now. A late-night meeting. A revised projection. A decision framed as necessary. A name that became inconvenient. He exhaled slowly. Even if that is true, he said, lifting his gaze back to her. You still have not answered my question. Why bring this to me instead of taking it public? Lily folded the napkin once, precise, controlled, then set it aside. Because there is one thing on that drive that only you can confirm, she said. Ethan felt a shift in that moment, subtle but undeniable. This was no longer about what she knew. It was about what he had not allowed himself to see. And what is that? He asked. Lily met his eyes, steady, unflinching. The original email you sent, she said. The one that never made it into the file. Ethan's breath slowed, his mind already moving ahead, reconstructing possibilities, implications, risks, and for the first time since she approached his table, the control he relied on did not give him answers. It gave him a single, unsettling realization. He could not remember what he had written in that email. The realization did not come all at once. It settled in slowly as Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over the screen for a second before he opened a secure app, the kind his firm used for internal archives. And for the first time that night, he stopped reacting and started verifying. Lily watched him without speaking. She did not lean in. She did not ask what he was doing. She simply stood there, her hands resting lightly against the counter, as if she had already seen this moment play out in her mind. Ethan typed quickly, his expression tightening as he navigated through layers of authentication. The system responded with its usual efficiency. Clean interface. No emotion. No history beyond what it chose to show. He entered a specific file reference. The same case. The same report. Daniel Harper. The document loaded in seconds. Identical to the one on the table. Sanitized. Finalized. Controlled. Ethan scrolled down to the internal communication log. It was shorter than he remembered. Too short. He frowned slightly and tapped another tab. Email records. The list appeared, time-stamped, organized, precise. He scanned quickly. His name appeared multiple times. Replies. Approvals. Forwarded summaries. Everything looked normal until he noticed a gap. A missing thread. One entry that should have been there between two timestamps exactly 12 minutes apart. He stopped scrolling. His finger hovered over the screen. Then he looked up at Lily. There is nothing here, he said. His tone was steady, but there was something beneath it now. Not denial. Not confidence. Something closer to calculation under pressure. Lily nodded once. That is the point. Ethan turned the phone slightly, angling it toward her. The system logs everything. Nothing just disappears. Lily's eyes moved briefly to the screen, then back to him. Not unless someone with the highest clearance removes it before the final archive, she said. Not unless that person signs off on the version everyone else sees. Ethan felt the shift land fully this time. Not as an accusation. As a structure. A system he had built. A system that now pointed back at him. He locked the screen and slipped the phone back into his pocket. "You are assuming I deleted it," he said. Lily shook her head slightly. "I am saying you had the authority to," she replied. She reached forward and tapped lightly on the flash drive still inside his jacket pocket. The gesture subtle but precise, as if she could see through the fabric. "And that drive contains the version before the deletion." Ethan held her gaze. "If that is true," he said, "then you are in possession of internal data that was never meant to leave the firm." Lily did not react to the implied threat. "It left the moment it was changed," she said. The words were simple, but they carried weight now because they aligned with what he had just seen. Ethan exhaled slowly and stepped half a pace closer, lowering his voice. "Do you understand what happens if this is real?" he asked. Lily met him without hesitation. "Yes," she said. "Do you?" That landed differently. Not confrontational. Direct. Ethan looked past her for a brief second, toward the dining room, toward the people who had no idea that a single missing email could shift millions of dollars, reputations, entire careers. Then he reached into his jacket again and pulled out the flash drive. This time he did not weigh it. He held it steady between his fingers. "If I plug this in," he said, "there is no going back." Lily's expression softened just slightly, not in sympathy, but in clarity. "There was no going back 5 years ago," she replied. The kitchen door swung open again behind her, and a line cook stepped out, calling her name for an order pickup, but she did not move yet. Ethan glanced at the hallway leading to the private office near the back of the restaurant. A small room managers used for inventory and scheduling. Quiet. Isolated. Secure enough for a moment like this. He looked back at her. "Come with me," he said. Lily shook her head. "You do not need me for what is on that drive," she replied. Ethan studied her for a second longer, then gave a small nod, accepting the boundary. He turned and walked toward the hallway, the flash drive still in his hand, his pace controlled but faster than before. Lily watched him go, then picked up the tray beside her and turned back toward the dining room, seamlessly returning to her role, except her eyes followed him until he disappeared behind the office door. And as that door closed, Ethan finally sat down in front of a computer, inserted the flash drive, and realized the first file on it was not an email. It was a video recording labeled with a date he did not expect. The office door clicked shut behind Ethan, sealing out the noise of the restaurant. And for the first time that night, the silence felt heavy instead of controlled. He sat down in the narrow chair behind the desk, the glow of the monitor reflecting faintly off the polished wood, and without giving himself another second to reconsider, he inserted the flash drive. The system recognized it instantly. One folder, one file, no encryption, no distraction, just a single video with a timestamp from 5 years ago. Ethan hesitated, his finger hovering over the trackpad. Then he pressed play. The screen flickered once before stabilizing. A conference room appeared. Familiar. Too familiar. Glass walls. City skyline behind it. His office from 5 years ago. The angle was slightly off, like it had been recorded from a laptop placed at the far end of the table. The audio crackled softly, then cleared. Daniel Harper sat on the opposite side, younger, tense, a stack of printed reports in front of him. Ethan recognized the moment before a single word was spoken. He leaned back slowly in the chair, his jaw tightening as his own voice filled the room. "We are not revisiting the projections," the recorded version of him said, calm, decisive. Daniel shook his head. "The numbers do not support the acquisition at that valuation," he replied. "If we push this through, it is going to collapse within 18 months. Ethan watched himself on screen lean forward slightly, hands clasped, posture composed. "The decision has already been made," his past self said. "Your job is to align the model." Daniel's voice rose, not out of anger, but urgency. "That is not alignment. That is manipulation." The word hung in the recorded air, and Ethan felt it land again, years later, sharper this time. He reached for the mouse and paused the video, his reflection staring back at him from the frozen frame. For a moment, he did not move. Then there was a knock on the office door. 2 quick taps. Controlled. Professional. Ethan did not look away from the screen. "Come in," he said. The door opened just enough for a man in a tailored navy suit to step inside. Mark Benson, head of operations. Mid-40s. Precise. Loyal. The kind of man who noticed everything and said very little unless it mattered. His eyes flicked from Ethan to the computer screen, then to the flash drive still connected. "I saw the alert," Mark said. "You accessed the Harper file." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression returning to something closer to neutral, but the tension had shifted. It was no longer hidden. "And you came down here personally," Ethan replied. "That is unusual." Mark closed the door behind him. "So, is reopening a sealed case from 5 years ago," he said. He stepped closer to the desk, his gaze settling on the paused video frame. "Daniel." "Ethan." The moment frozen in time. Mark's expression did not change, but his voice lowered slightly. "Where did you get that?" Ethan tapped the flash drive lightly with his finger. "Does it matter?" he asked. Mark held his gaze. "It matters if it exists outside this room," he said. The implication was clear now. Not defensive, not emotional. Strategic. Ethan let out a slow breath and turned back to the screen. He said the numbers would not hold. Ethan said, almost to himself. Mark did not respond immediately. "And they did not," he said after a beat. Ethan's eyes shifted to him. "We adjusted post-acquisition," Mark continued. "We stabilized it." Ethan nodded once, but it was not agreement. It was recognition of the narrative he had accepted for years. He reached forward and pressed play again. The video resumed. Daniel's voice filled the room once more. "If you sign this, it becomes your decision," Daniel said in the recording. "Not mine." Ethan watched his past self pick up a pen. Smooth. Certain. Final. He paused the video again just before the signature hit the paper. The room felt smaller now. The air heavier. Mark stepped closer to the desk. "Ethan," he said, his tone still controlled, but firmer now. "Whatever that is, it needs to be contained." Ethan did not look at him. His eyes stayed on the frozen frame of his own hand holding the pen. "Contained," he repeated quietly. Mark nodded. "We can handle it internally," he said. "No one else needs to see this." There it was. The decision point. Not 5 years ago. Now. Ethan leaned back slowly, the chair creaking under the shift in weight, and for the first time since the video started, he smiled slightly, not out of relief, but because he recognized the pattern repeating itself. "That is exactly what I said last time," he replied. Mark's expression tightened just enough to reveal the stakes had changed. "And it worked," Mark said. Ethan finally turned his head and looked directly at him. "Did it?" he asked. The question lingered between them, unanswered, because in the next second, Ethan reached forward, unpaused the video, and let the recording continue past the moment he had stopped, revealing something neither of them had expected to see. The video did not stop where Ethan remembered it ending. That was the first thing that felt wrong. The frame continued past the moment of his signature, past the clean conclusion he had carried in his memory for years, and instead of cutting to silence, the recording kept going. Daniel did not stand up immediately. He stayed seated, his hands flat on the table, his eyes fixed on Ethan with a clarity that felt almost unsettling even through the screen. "You are making this your decision," Daniel said again, slower this time. Ethan watched his past self nod once, short and decisive. "That is how leadership works," the recorded Ethan replied. Then something shifted. Daniel reached into his folder and pulled out a second document. Not the official report. Something else. He slid it across the table. "Then you should read this before you sign anything else," Daniel said. In the present, Ethan leaned forward slightly, his attention sharpening. He did not remember this part. Not at all. The camera angle did not show the full page clearly, but a section of bold text was visible near the top. Internal risk disclosure. Mark moved closer to the screen, his posture tightening for the first time. "Pause it," he said. Ethan did not. The video continued. On screen, Ethan's past self glanced down at the document briefly, then pushed it back without reading more than a few lines. "This is not relevant to the final model," he said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "It is the entire point," he replied. "This shows the external pressure on the valuation. It is not organic growth. It is being forced." The words echoed in the small office. Present Ethan felt something colder settle into place. Not confusion. Recognition. He reached for the keyboard and rewound the video by a few seconds, replaying the moment where the document title appeared. Internal risk disclosure. He froze the frame and leaned closer to the screen, trying to catch more detail, but the resolution was just out of reach. Mark exhaled slowly beside him. That document was never filed, he said. Ethan turned his head slightly. You are sure? Mark nodded once. I would have seen it. Ethan studied him for a second, then looked back at the screen. Or it was removed before you ever could. The room fell quiet again. The implication was no longer theoretical. It was structural, a layer beneath the official narrative. Ethan pressed play once more. The video resumed. Daniel leaned forward now, his voice steady but firm. If this goes through, you are exposing the firm to a correction we cannot absorb without restructuring half the portfolio, he said. I am putting that on record. Ethan watched his past self remain still, then closed the folder with a single motion. You are done here, the recorded Ethan said. Daniel did not move. Then you are choosing this, he replied. Not the data, not the analysis. This. The word lingered, heavier than the rest. In the present, Ethan reached forward and paused the video again. His fingers rested on the edge of the desk, still, controlled, but the calculation behind his eyes had changed. He was no longer trying to understand what happened. He was mapping what had been hidden. That file exists somewhere, he said quietly. Mark crossed his arms, his stance shifting into something more defensive. If it did, it would have surfaced by now, he replied. Ethan shook his head slightly. Not if it was buried the same way this email thread was, he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone again, unlocking it with a quick motion. His tone shifted, subtle but decisive. There is an offsite archive, he said. Legal retention. Separate from our operational system. Mark's expression changed. Not dramatically, but enough. That archive is restricted, he said. Ethan looked at him directly. So is everything that matters, he replied. He tapped a number on his phone and held it to his ear. The line rang once, then connected. This is Ethan Caldwell, he said. I need immediate access to the 5-year legal retention archive for the Harper acquisition case. There was a pause on the other end. Ethan listened, then nodded once. Yes, he said. Tonight. He ended the call and set the phone down. Mark watched him carefully now. You are escalating this, he said. Ethan leaned back in the chair, his posture settling into something new. Not defensive, not reactive, intentional. No, he replied. I am correcting it. The shift was clear now. The control had moved. Not fully, not yet, but enough to change the direction of the room. Ethan turned back to the screen, his eyes landing on the frozen image of Daniel holding out that second document. If that disclosure exists, he said slowly, then the entire decision was built on something we chose not to see. Mark did not answer this time, because for the first time, he did not have one. Ethan picked up the flash drive again, turning it once between his fingers before setting it down beside the keyboard. And if it is in that archive, he added, then this is bigger than a correction. He looked back at the screen one last time, then reached for his jacket. It is a rewrite. Outside the office, the restaurant carried on as usual, unaware that a single document, missing for 5 years, was about to change everything. And as Ethan opened the door to step back into the hallway, his phone buzzed with a message from the legal team, access granted, but one line at the bottom stopped him cold. File retrieval requires dual authorization, and the second authorization belonged to someone he did not expect. The message stayed on Ethan's screen longer than it should have, as if the system itself wanted him to read it twice. Dual authorization required. Second approver. Name, Lily Harper. Ethan did not move for a full second. Then another. The hallway noise crept in around him, plates clinking, footsteps passing, a hostess greeting a new table, but none of it reached him fully anymore. He read the name again, slower this time, making sure there was no mistake. There was not. He turned back toward the dining room immediately. The shift was instant. This was no longer a hidden investigation. This was a controlled confrontation, and for the first time since she placed the note under his bill, the advantage tilted in his direction. He stepped out of the hallway and scanned the room. Lily was at the far side now, taking an order, her posture unchanged, her voice calm, as if nothing had escalated beyond a quiet exchange. Ethan walked straight toward her. Not rushed, not hesitant, direct. She noticed him halfway across the room. Her eyes met his briefly, then returned to the table she was serving, finishing the order with precision before turning fully to face him. "You look like you found something," she said. Ethan stopped in front of her, close enough that their conversation would not carry. "I did," he replied, "and it requires your approval." Lily's expression did not change immediately, but there was a slight pause, almost imperceptible, before she spoke again. "Approval for what?" Ethan pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward her. The message was still open, clear, unmistakable. Her name, her role, her authority. Lily's eyes moved across the screen once. Then she looked back at him. The calm remained, but something underneath it shifted. Not surprise. Recognition. "You went to legal retention," she said. Ethan nodded. "And they will not release the file without you," he replied. "Which means you were never just waiting for me to see the truth. You were positioned inside it." Lily held his gaze for a moment longer, then glanced briefly toward the manager's station, as if checking the rhythm of the floor, before stepping slightly to the side, guiding him out of the direct path of passing staff. "You figured that out faster than I expected," she said. Ethan's tone remained even. "You made sure I would," he replied. "You put the drive in my hands. You knew where it would lead." Lily folded her arms lightly, not defensive, just measured. "I knew where it could lead," she corrected. "There is a difference." Ethan studied her now with a different lens. Not as a server, not as someone reacting to him, as someone who had designed an entry point into a system he controlled. "You have access to legal retention," he said. "That is not something a waitress picks up on the side." Lily allowed a faint, almost ironic smile. "No," she said. "It is not." There was a beat of silence. Then Ethan leaned in slightly. "So which part of this is real?" he asked. "The uniform or the clearance?" Lily did not look away. "Both," she said. "That is why you are still here." The answer landed with clarity. Not a reveal for shock. A statement of position. Ethan straightened. The balance between them had shifted again, not back to where it started, but into something more precise. A negotiation neither of them had fully acknowledged yet. "Then approve it," he said. "Let me see the full archive." Lily's gaze flicked once more to the phone, then back to him. "And what happens after you see it?" she asked. Ethan did not hesitate this time. "That depends on what is in it," he said. Lily shook her head. Slightly. "No," she replied. "It depends on what you are willing to admit once you do." The words held steady between them. Not pressure, not persuasion. A condition. Ethan exhaled slowly, then extended the phone toward her. "You wanted me to recognize it," he said. "I do." Lily looked at the screen again, her thumb hovering just above it, close enough to approve, close enough to unlock everything that had been buried, but she did not press yet. Instead, she looked back up at him, her voice quieter now, but sharper. "There is one more thing you need to understand before I do this," she said. Ethan's expression remained steady. "What is that?" he asked. Lily held his gaze, unflinching. "That file does not just show what you signed," she said. "It shows who asked you to sign it." The shift hit immediately. Not subtle, not gradual, direct. Ethan's grip on the phone tightened slightly as the implication expanded beyond him, beyond a single decision, into something larger, something that reached higher than he had accounted for. And as Lily's thumb finally moved toward the screen, he realized the next name he was about to see might not be one he could afford to expose. Lily's thumb hovered over the screen for one more second, then pressed down with quiet certainty. The approval went through instantly. Ethan felt the shift before he even looked at the display. A new notification appeared. Archive unlocked. Retrieval in progress. Lily stepped back slightly, creating space, but her presence did not fade. It anchored the moment. "It is loading," she said. Ethan nodded once, his eyes fixed on the screen as the system began to pull data from the legal retention server. A progress bar appeared. Slow, deliberate, not designed for convenience. Designed for records that were never meant to move quickly. Around them, the restaurant continued without interruption. A server laughed near the bar. A couple argued quietly over dessert choices. The world remained unchanged while something irreversible unfolded between them. Ethan glanced up briefly. Lily had already turned her body slightly, scanning the room, aware of her section, aware of timing, yet completely composed in the middle of a moment that could dismantle everything he had built. "You planned this down to the minute," he said. Lily did not deny it. "I planned enough to make sure you could not ignore it," she replied. Ethan let out a slow breath. "There is a difference." Lily looked back at him. Not tonight, she said. The progress bar reached 50%. Ethan shifted his weight slightly, his mind already moving ahead, calculating implications, preparing responses, but beneath that, something else settled in. He had not asked the most important question yet. How long have you had access? He asked. Lily's answer came without hesitation. 18 months, she said. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. And you waited. Lily nodded. Because timing matters more than truth, she said. Truth without timing gets buried again. The statement landed with precision. Ethan looked back at the screen. 65%. The file name began to appear beneath the loading bar. Harper Acquisition. Full retention log. He felt the weight of it before it even opened. You could have done this without me, he said. Lily shook her head slightly. No, she replied. I needed you to open it. Ethan looked at her again, sharper now. Why? Lily met his gaze, steady, unwavering. Because it means more when you are the one who sees it first, she said. There was no arrogance in her tone, only certainty. The progress bar reached 90%. The system paused briefly, then a second prompt appeared. Confirm identity before viewing restricted content. Ethan placed his thumb against the biometric scanner on the side of his phone. The device recognized him instantly. Access confirmed. The file opened. A list of entries appeared. Emails, internal memos, meeting logs, time-stamped, untouched. Ethan scrolled once, slowly, then stopped. His eyes locked onto a specific entry near the top. Subject line, Executive Directive. Sent 2 hours before the meeting in the video. Sender, not him, not Daniel, someone higher. The name sat there, clear, undeniable, and for the first time since Lily placed that note under his bill, the pressure shifted outward, away from him, toward something larger, something that explained why the system had moved the way it did. Lily watched his reaction closely now. You see it, she said quietly. Ethan did not respond immediately. He tapped the entry. The email expanded. The text was short, direct. Proceed with adjusted valuation. Ensure compliance at all levels. Final approval will be supported. Ethan read it once. Then again. His jaw tightened slightly. He looked up at Lily. You knew this was here, he said. Lily did not answer the accusation. I knew you needed to read it yourself, she replied. The balance shifted again. Not fully, not decisively, but enough. Ethan straightened, the phone still in his hand, the email still open. This changes the context, he said. Lily's eyes did not leave his. It changes the responsibility, she corrected. Ethan exhaled slowly, then scrolled further down the archive, searching, connecting, building a clearer picture, but as he moved past the initial entries, another file caught his attention. Different format. Not email, not memo. Audio log. Recorded 2 minutes after the meeting ended. Ethan paused, his thumb hovering over it. Lily noticed the shift immediately. That one matters, she said. Ethan glanced at her briefly. Why? He asked. Lily's voice dropped slightly, more serious now. Because that is where the story stops being official, she said. Ethan looked back at the screen, his finger moving closer to the file, and for the first time that night, he hesitated not because he feared what he had done, but because he was about to hear what someone else had decided after he walked out of that room. His finger did not press play right away. Instead, Ethan lowered the phone slightly and looked past the screen, not at Lily, not at the room, but at the reflection of himself faintly visible on the glass panel behind the bar. For a moment, everything aligned. The missing email, the directive from above, the document Daniel tried to show him. This was no longer a single decision buried in time. This was a chain, and chains could be traced. He lifted the phone again, but instead of opening the audio file, he locked the screen. Lily noticed immediately. You are not going to play it, she said. Ethan slipped the phone into his jacket pocket, his expression steady, but the shift was unmistakable now. Not here, he replied. Lily's eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in recalibration. You are changing the pace, she said. Ethan gave a small nod. I am changing the order, he corrected. That distinction mattered. He stepped back half a pace, creating space between them, then glanced toward the hallway leading to the office again, as if considering whether to return, but he did not move. Instead, he turned back to her fully. You said timing matters, he said. So does sequence. Lily folded her arms lightly, watching him more carefully now. What are you doing? She asked. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone again, but this time he did not open the archive. He opened his contacts, scrolled once, stopped. Then he turned the screen slightly so she could see the name before he pressed call. Chairman Robert Halston. Lily's breath shifted, just slightly, but enough for him to notice. The control tilted again. Not completely, not safely, but enough to change the stakes. The line rang once, twice, then connected. Ethan did not waste time. "Robert," he said, his voice calm, precise. "I need 10 minutes of your time tonight." There was a pause on the other end, then a low response Ethan did not put on speaker. He listened, then replied, "It is about the Harper acquisition, something that did not make it into the final record." Another pause, longer this time. Ethan's eyes flicked briefly to Lily, then back ahead. "Yes," he said, "I am aware of the directive." He ended the call without another word. The phone lowered slowly in his hand. Lily studied him, the earlier certainty in her posture now layered with something new. Not doubt, awareness. "You are bringing him into this," she said. Ethan nodded once. "He was already in it," he replied. Lily held his gaze. "That is not how this was supposed to go," she said. Ethan allowed a faint, controlled smile. "That depends on whose plan you are following," he said. The words landed with quiet precision. Lily exhaled slowly, then uncrossed her arms, shifting her weight slightly, grounding herself again. "You still have not heard the recording," she said. Ethan looked at her, steady, composed, but no longer reactive. "I do not need it to know what comes next," he replied. Lily shook her head once. "You think you do," she said. "You are wrong." Ethan did not argue. He simply reached into his jacket again, pulled out the flash drive, and placed it on the edge of the table between them, his fingers resting on it for a brief second before letting go. "Then I will listen," he said, but not as a reaction. Lily's eyes dropped to the drive, then lifted again. "As what?" she asked. Ethan met her gaze directly. "As leverage," he said. The word changed the air between them. Not louder, not sharper, just clearer. This was no longer exposure. It was positioning. Lily nodded slowly, absorbing the shift, then glanced toward the entrance of the restaurant where a black sedan had just pulled up outside, visible through the glass. "Then you better be ready," she said quietly. Ethan followed her gaze, his expression tightening slightly as he recognized the car before the door even opened. And as the man stepping out adjusted his coat under the streetlight, Ethan realized the next move was no longer his to schedule because Robert Halston had decided to come in person. The restaurant door opened before anyone announced it. Robert Halston did not wait for a host. He stepped inside with the quiet confidence of someone who owned more than the building itself. His coat was dark, tailored, still carrying the chill of the Manhattan night, and his presence moved through the room like a subtle current, shifting attention without raising a single voice. Ethan did not move. He watched him approach, measured, calculating. Lily stood beside him, her posture unchanged, but her attention sharpened. This was no longer a private confrontation. This was a convergence. Halston reached their table and stopped. His eyes moved first to Ethan, then briefly to Lily, taking in the uniform, the stance, the dynamic, before returning to Ethan again. "You said 10 minutes, Halston said. His tone was even, controlled, not curious, not surprised. Ethan nodded once. "I did." He gestured lightly toward the empty chair across from him. "I will need all 10. Halston sat without hesitation. He placed his phone on the table, screen down, a small but deliberate signal. "No distractions, no recordings, just the conversation. Then start talking," he said. Ethan did not rush. He reached into his jacket, pulled out the phone, and reopened the archive. The executive directive still sat there, untouched, the sender line clear and unmistakable. He turned the screen toward Halston. "This came from your office," Ethan said. Halston glanced down, his expression unchanged, then looked back up. "Yes," he replied. No denial, no hesitation. Lily watched that moment carefully. The absence of resistance mattered more than any argument. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "What did not make it into the record," he continued, "is what came after." He reached for the flash drive on the table, picked it up, and placed it beside Halston's phone. "There is an audio file," he said. "Recorded 2 minutes after the meeting ended." Halston's gaze flicked briefly to the drive, then back to Ethan. "And you have not listened to it yet," he said. It was not a question. Ethan held his gaze. Not in full, he replied. Halston leaned back slightly in his chair, the faintest shift in posture, but it carried weight. Then you are already behind, he said. Lily's eyes moved between them, catching the shift. The confidence. The implication. Ethan did not react immediately. He reached forward, unlocked his phone again, and opened the audio file. The screen displayed a simple interface. Timestamp. Duration. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. He placed the phone flat on the table, between all three of them. Then let us catch up, he said. He pressed play. The recording began with the sound of chairs moving, papers being gathered, a door closing, then silence for a few seconds. In the present, no one spoke. On the recording, a voice broke the quiet. Not Ethan. Not Daniel. A third voice. Older. Steadier. Recognizable. Did he sign it? The voice asked. Ethan felt the shift immediately, not in surprise, but in confirmation. He did not look at Halston. He did not need to. On the recording, Daniel's voice responded. Yes. A pause. Then the third voice again. Good, it said. Then we proceed as planned. Lily's fingers tightened slightly against the edge of the table, just enough to register. Ethan kept his expression still, but his focus sharpened. The recording continued. And the disclosure? Daniel asked. Remove it, the third voice replied. It complicates the narrative. The word echoed in the present. Narrative. Not data. Not analysis. Narrative. Ethan reached forward and paused the recording. The room around them felt smaller now. Tighter. Halston's expression had not changed, but his silence carried more weight than any response could have. Ethan looked at him directly. You were in the room, he said. Halston met his gaze. I was on the call, he corrected. The distinction was precise. Intentional. Lily leaned in slightly now, her voice quiet but firm. And you told him to remove the disclosure, she said. Halston's eyes shifted to her for the first time with real focus. He studied her, not dismissing, not acknowledging, simply measuring. And you are, he asked. Lily did not look away. Someone who kept a copy, she replied. The tension held. Unbroken. Ethan exhaled slowly, then tapped the phone once, letting the paused recording sit between them like evidence no one could ignore. This is not just about a decision anymore, he said. Halston nodded once. No, he agreed. It is about who controls what happens next. The words landed clean. No denial. No defense. Just positioning. Ethan's grip on the table edge tightened slightly, not out of uncertainty, but because he understood the scale now. This was not exposure. This was a negotiation at a level where outcomes were decided before they were announced. Lily watched both men, her presence no longer peripheral, but central to the axis of the conversation. Ethan leaned back slowly, his eyes never leaving Halston. Then let us be clear, he said, because I am about to decide whether this stays in this room. Halston's expression remained steady, but there was a flicker of something new beneath it. Not fear, not concern, calculation adjusting to a new variable. And as Ethan's phone screen lit up again with an incoming message from Mark Benson, flagged urgent, with a single-line preview that read, "They know you accessed the archive," Ethan realized the room was no longer the only place this decision was unfolding. The message from Mark Benson stayed on Ethan's screen, glowing faintly against the dim restaurant lighting, but Ethan did not open it. Not yet. He let it sit there, visible, deliberate, another piece on the table. Halston noticed. Of course he did. His eyes flicked to the screen for half a second before returning to Ethan. You are not the only one who understands timing, Halston said quietly. Ethan gave a slight nod. That is becoming very clear. Lily remained still, but her attention sharpened again. The conversation had moved beyond implication. This was structure now. Evidence. Control. Ethan reached forward and pressed play on the audio file again. The recording resumed exactly where it left off. Remove it, the third voice had said. It complicates the narrative. Then something new followed. A detail none of them had addressed yet. Papers sliding across a table. A pen tapping lightly. Then Daniel's voice again, lower this time. I am documenting this, he said. The third voice responded immediately. You can document whatever you want, it said. It will not be the version that moves forward. Ethan paused the recording again. This time, the silence that followed was heavier, more final. He looked directly at Halston. That is obstruction, he said. Halston did not react defensively. He leaned back slightly, his hands resting calmly on the table. That is governance, he replied. Lily's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough to register the difference in language. Ethan held Halston's gaze. You are redefining the words, he said. Halston gave a faint, controlled smile. I am clarifying them, he replied. The tension did not rise. It sharpened. Ethan reached into his jacket again and pulled out his phone, unlocking it with a precise motion. This time, he opened a different section of the archive. Not the emails. Not the audio. A subfolder labeled Legal Acknowledgements. He scrolled once, then stopped. A file opened. A signed statement. Timestamped 3 hours after the meeting. The signature at the bottom was not his. It was Daniel Harper's. Lily leaned in slightly, her breath catching for the first time. Ethan turned the screen so both she and Halston could see clearly. The text was concise. Direct. I, Daniel Harper, confirm that I raised formal concerns regarding the valuation adjustments and the removal of supporting risk disclosures. I was instructed to proceed regardless. This statement is submitted for legal record. Ethan tapped the screen lightly, enlarging the signature. Real. Verified. Time-stamped. Halston's eyes moved across the document once. Slowly. Thoroughly. He did not interrupt. Ethan spoke first. This was filed, he said. Halston nodded once. Yes, he replied. No denial. No hesitation. Lily's voice came next, quieter, but steady. Then why was it never attached to the case? Halston looked at her directly now. Because it was not relevant to the final outcome, he said. The answer landed with weight. Not because it explained anything. Because it confirmed everything. Ethan exhaled slowly, then tapped another line on the document. A reference number. Cross-linked. There is an attachment, he said. He selected it. The file opened instantly. A scanned image. Grainy, but clear enough. It showed a printed version of the internal risk disclosure Daniel had tried to present in the meeting. Every section highlighted. Every risk outlined. Every projection contradicted. Lily's hand moved slightly on the table, her fingers tightening. That is it, she said softly. Ethan did not look at her. His eyes stayed on the screen. It was always here, he said. Halston remained still, composed. But the balance had shifted now in a way that could not be redirected. This was no longer about interpretation. This was documentation. Ethan locked the phone and placed it flat on the table between them. You had the disclosure, he said. Halston nodded once. Yes. You had the statement, Ethan continued. Another nod. Yes. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice lower now, but sharper. And you chose to proceed anyway. Halston met his gaze without hesitation. I chose to protect the firm, he said. The words were clear. Final. No apology. No adjustment. Lily looked between them, the weight of the confirmation settling in fully now. Not a suspicion. Not a theory. A decision. Ethan sat back slowly, the chair creaking under the shift, his mind no longer searching for answers, but aligning what he had in front of him. Evidence. Audio. Signed acknowledgement. Directive. It was complete. He reached for his phone again, but this time he did not open the archive. He opened a different app. External communications. Secure. He began typing. Halston watched him carefully now. What are you doing? He asked. Ethan did not look up. Correcting the narrative, he replied. Lily's eyes moved to the screen, catching the recipient line as it filled in. Securities and Exchange Commission. Whistleblower intake. Halston's posture shifted for the first time. Not dramatically, but enough. That would be a mistake, he said. Ethan paused typing for a fraction of a second, then continued. No, he said quietly. This is the first accurate record. The air in the room changed. Not louder, not chaotic, just irreversible. And as Ethan's thumb hovered over the send button, Lily noticed something else on the screen, a second attachment being added automatically. A file she had never seen before, labeled Board Resolution Draft, with Halston's name at the top, and she realized this was not just exposure anymore. It was a move that could remove him entirely. The screen glowed in Ethan's hand, the send button waiting, small and quiet, yet heavier than anything he had ever signed in his life. And for the first time since this began, his fingers did not move with certainty, they trembled. Just slightly, just enough for him to notice. The restaurant noise returned around him, not distant anymore, but sharp, real, plates clinking, voices layering over one another, life continuing while he stood on the edge of something irreversible. Lily saw it. The shift, the hesitation, She did not speak. She did not interrupt. She simply watched him, because this was no longer her moment to push. This was his moment to decide. Ethan's thumb hovered over the screen, then stopped, and without warning, the memory came back. Not the boardroom. Not the numbers. Something smaller. Quieter. 5 years ago. A narrow hospital hallway in Brooklyn. The smell of antiseptic. The hum of fluorescent lights. Daniel Harper sitting on a plastic chair, a folder in his hands, unopened, his eyes fixed on the floor as Ethan stood in front of him, already late for another meeting, already halfway out the door in his mind. I just need you to look at it one more time, Daniel had said. His voice was steady, but there was something beneath it, something human, something asking to be heard. Ethan remembered checking his watch. He remembered the impatience. He remembered the exact words he chose. We are done here, he had said. Simple, clean, final. Daniel had nodded once. Not arguing, not pleading, just accepting. And Ethan had turned away. He had walked down that hallway without looking back, the sound of his own footsteps echoing louder than anything Daniel could have said. Back in the present, Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second, and when he opened them again, the screen in his hand looked different, not because it had changed, but because he had. His breath was no longer steady. It caught slightly as he exhaled, and for the first time in years, something broke through the control he had built so carefully. A crack. Small. Real. He lowered the phone slowly. Lily saw the shift immediately. Ethan, she said quietly. Not pushing. Not guiding. Just calling his name. He looked at her, and there was no calculation in his expression now, no strategy, just something raw, something unguarded that had not been there before. I never read it, he said. His voice was lower, rougher than before. He asked me to read it, and I did not. Lily did not respond right away. She let the words sit, because they mattered more than any argument. Ethan swallowed, his grip tightening slightly around the phone, and then loosening again. I thought I was protecting something bigger, he continued. But I was just choosing what was easier. His voice faltered slightly on. The last word. Not dramatically, just enough to feel it. A single breath. A pause. Then he looked down at the screen again, and this time, his thumb moved, but not toward the send button. He tapped the contact list instead. Scrolled. Stopped. Daniel Harper. The name had been there all along, buried in an old contact file, never deleted, never used. Ethan stared at it for a second, then pressed call. The line rang. Once. Twice. 3 times. Each second stretching longer than it should. Lily watched him, her expression steady, but her eyes softening just slightly, because this was no longer about exposure. This was about something else entirely. The call connected. A quiet voice on the other end. Hello. Ethan's breath caught again, and this time he did not hide it. His voice came out slower, less controlled, but more honest than anything he had said all night. Daniel, he said. There was a pause. A longer one. Then a response. Cautious, uncertain. Who is this? Ethan closed his eyes briefly, and when he spoke again, his voice carried something new. Not authority. Not defense. Just truth. It is Ethan, he said. And I should have listened to you. The silence on the other end deepened, heavier than any accusation, and Ethan felt it settle into his chest, not as pressure, but as consequence, real and undeniable. And as he stood there, phone still in his hand, he realized this call was not the end of what he had done. It was the beginning of what he still had to face. The call did not end the way Ethan expected. It did not resolve anything. It only opened something that had been closed for too long. And when he stepped out of the restaurant an hour later, the cold Manhattan air hit his face in a way that felt sharper than usual, more real, as if the world itself had shifted slightly out of place. Lily stood just inside the doorway, watching him, her expression calm, her role complete. She did not follow. She did not speak. She simply gave a small, almost invisible nod, then turned back into the restaurant, disappearing into the rhythm of plates and voices, leaving him alone with what came next. The hospital was 12 minutes away. Ethan did not remember the drive. He only remembered the moment he pushed through the glass doors and saw the fluorescent lights stretch down the hallway just like they had 5 years ago. The same smell. The same quiet hum. Only this time, he did not walk past it. He stopped. Daniel Harper stood near the nurse's station, exactly where Ethan had left him years ago in memory, but now he was older, steadier, A man who had carried something heavy for a long time and learned how to stand with it. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Ethan stepped forward. Slow, careful, as if one wrong movement might break something fragile between them. I should have been here, Ethan said. His voice was not controlled anymore. It was honest. Daniel studied him, not with anger, not with warmth, but with something deeper. Recognition. You were not, he replied. The words were simple. They landed with weight. Ethan nodded once, his throat tightening as he tried to hold steady, but the effort slipped, just enough for his voice to shake when he spoke again. I know, he said, and I am sorry. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything that had been left unsaid for 5 years. Then Daniel took a step forward. One step, enough to close the distance. His hand lifted slightly, hesitated for a fraction of a second, then reached out and grabbed Ethan's jacket, pulling him into an embrace that was not careful, not measured, but real. Ethan did not resist. His arms came up instinctively, wrapping around Daniel with a force that surprised even him. And for the first time in years, the control broke completely. His breath caught hard. His shoulders tightened. And then it happened. A single tear slipped down, quiet, unguarded, landing between them without permission. Daniel held him there. Firm, steady, not forgiving with words. Not yet, but not pushing him away either. Just holding, just allowing the moment to exist. Ethan's grip tightened slightly, as if anchoring himself to something he had almost lost entirely. I should have listened, he said again, his voice breaking this time, the words barely holding together. Daniel pulled back just enough to look at him, his hand still gripping Ethan's sleeve, his own eyes no longer as steady as before. You are here now, he said. It was not a full answer. It was not a full forgiveness. But it was something real, something alive. Ethan nodded, his breath uneven, his composure gone in a way that felt unfamiliar and necessary at the same time. Behind them, a nurse paused briefly, watching from a distance with a small, quiet smile, then turned and walked away, leaving the two men alone in that space, as if the hallway itself understood what was happening. Ethan wiped his face quickly, not to hide it, but to steady himself, and when he looked back at Daniel, there was something different in his eyes. Not power, not control, something softer, something earned. I am going to fix what I can, he said. Daniel held his gaze for a moment longer, then gave a small nod. Start with the truth, he replied. And in that quiet hallway, under the same lights that once carried him away, Ethan finally understood that the truth was not what he had avoided all those years. It was what had been waiting for him to come back.